And good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Unscripted and Unchained RPG review. This is the OSR tabletop with myself, DM Bloodworth. And today's topic, I wanted to bring this up. This has been something that's been kind of brewing within my own kind of circle of YouTube channels and such that I follow and people who I listen to. And so here is the question for the day. And I'm certainly going to welcome people to come in and to participate in this conversation. I will put it in the comments section. I'm going to do this periodically, so anyone can jump in and give their own comments on it. I have invited some people directly to come on in. Hopefully, they'll be able to make it. But what is role playing, and can it be achieved with any game system? And so this is where this argument had come from, in that it was argued that you cannot role play in Dungeons and Dragons or any other like first generation tabletop role playing game. And I'm, of course, going to push back on that idea. But I want to learn as much of the terminology and the way that everyone is looking at it that might be different from mine. And so, I am open to being convinced that I am, incorrect on some things, but I think on some others that, I have it down fairly well. So without further ado, let me switch over and check out the comments. So there was a comment several hours ago. Hopefully, that's just not a time zone difference and mistake. But Dark Winter, about 7 hours ago, posted, yes, requires player investment and decent GM. However, in my experience, it's easily ruined. And that may be so. And that I could definitely agree with, that it does require that everyone is buying into it. And so, yes, that is an absolute requirement in order to have role playing. However, I think I'm going to slip a little curveball into that concept when I get right into talking about it. And you'll see where I'm going as soon as I bring it up. So I'm going to just say hello to the others that have come in already. So Alonso, welcome. And your answer is yes, but you need very special people in the group. And yes, that will certainly make it a lot easier and a lot enjoyable. But and I'm not going to bury this lead too much. You can role play in a single player computer role playing game. You can role play in Skyrim. You can role play in Fallout 4, even though you're playing by yourself with no one else in there with you, and yet you can still role play it. I'm gonna build out that idea as well, going forward. But let me get this invite up there, because I see that some have already jumped in that might want to pop in as well. So let me find my invite, and I am going to post the invite. So Table Runner Crispy, I know that might be for you right away. So that is already in there. Be curious, how's it going? Good to see you. Table Runner, the link is dropped in there, so feel free to jump in. Steve, hey, how's it going? Be curious. Thank you as always. Always quick to dish out those memberships. And here we go. Oh, I have to adjust my volume up over here. Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you.
Can you hear me okay? Is it coming through all right?
I don't hear you yet.
Not yet?
Let me see. I got to unmute you. Sorry. Problem on my issue. All right, go ahead.
Okay. How's that? Sound check?
Yes, very, very good. That was on my end. Yeah, because I have. Let me just close out this other one because I don't have any. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I usually have it opened up on another tab as well so that I could do the
Yes.
giveaways. And then I was like, wait a second, I don't have any giveaways left to give out for for this month. So didn't need
Just
that.
too generous. You're too generous.
Yeah.
You catch the flu and all of a sudden you give away all your stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had the flu. I have COVID, so.
Are you feeling any better yet, or are you still under the weather?
It's a hard one to call. It's like I have so many different drugs pumped into me, so it's pretty hard to say.
Walking pharmacy as it is.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy because normally if like my throat's bothering me, if I'm coughing a lot, I'll do a shot of rum, and that kind of cleans that up really quick. And
sure.
With antibiotics and all these other crap, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can mix that in or not. I'd prefer the rum, to be honest. But anyway, so let's see. Bacon Gaming. And again, anyone is welcome to jump in on this. So I don't know if you just caught the point I was making when they was like, yeah, but you need a great group of players, but you can role play a single player RPG.
Sure.
Yeah, as soon as you make the decision, oh, I'm going to play this, like I did this the last time I played Skyrim, I decided I'm going to play hardcore mode. So as soon as my character is dead, I'm re-rolling. All right? That's role playing. That is going outside of the parameters of what the character sheet says, basically. And your
I'm terribly sorry as a guest. I just have a question. I really need to know so that we can have a productive conversation.
Right.
We're dancing around what is role play. So you've alluded to, you could in a single player computer game role play that by bringing more to it. So is the definition of role playing bringing something that's not on the character sheet, or how would you define it? I guess I want to use your definitions.
I would say that if you are going beyond what the character sheet lays out for you, then you are doing more role playing than just playing the role of that character. You know what I'm saying? You're in hand. Like I know that there's 1D, 2D, 3D, and the the different definitions that I've heard of it. Like 1D, you're a human dice roller. To use Shauner's expression, you're just there. You're not even really engaged in anything. It's like you might even forget when your turn is, and someone will have to remind you, "Hey, Brian, roll the dice now." Oh, what dice am I supposed to roll? And Brian is constantly in, and if anybody's Brian, I'm just using.
Who's Brian? I'm going to say Brian getting called out here by DM Bloodwood.
Brian is asking, obvious questions and such like that, and really not engaged in, not just the game, but not really engaged in role playing at all. All right. Now, second, the second tier or 2D. All right, you are at least functioning within the role of your character class, let's say, and the only time that you engage is when it's time for your character to do something that he or she does. If I'm playing a thief character, let me know when you need a lock picked. Let me know this, but otherwise I'm kind of disengaged.
Sure.
If you have anything to add in on those.
I would say in what I would consider non-role play, but still engaged in the game, would be your kind of your 2D player. So this is most of us most of the time. And most of us most of the time, we're into it, but most of the talking at the table isn't in character. Most of the talking is either talking about the rules themselves, so on the meta-analysis side of things, or it's out of character, just chatting with buddies around the table, but still engaged in the game. Like we like the game, and I like maybe the wargaming side of it, and so I'm really leaning hard into the wargaming side, but I'm not. Most of what I say is not in character. It's just me talking as guy that likes the game.
Yeah.
So that's kind of this in my parlance, that when I say that's kind of the standard.
Right.
3D is where we go into, it's once the game starts, all of the rule books are put away. You still have your character sheet, of course, and you still have dice, but everything is in character, from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, with just minor deviations to clarify things, not to ask questions of the game master, because that's a big no. But instead of doing that, just, here's how much damage I did, or, you have to communicate the mechanics of the game.
Right.
But all of your interplayer correspondences or interactions are in character. So me playing as the character that whole time. 4D, which is us dirty 4Ders, there's, in order to, what it really is just in character play, but with an added element of, within certain parameters, in order to facilitate in character play, we allow players to add, we'll call it definition to the world. So you can make certain assumptions based on the verisimilitude of the world that you or the setting where it makes sense. But it still really is just in character. It's not trying. There's always parameters around that, so you can't just choose a win condition. And here I'm just going to invent the doohickey I need right now to win the scenario, or get past the obstacle. So, but the main thing for me is understanding what you're using as a definition of what is this thing that we call role playing. Is it just playing the character sheet, or what does that look like, and how do we like, how is that embodied in practice at the table?
So so to use some of your examples, like in when you said in like 3D, I would actually move talking about dice results into the 2D realm. And the reason why is because if you could see it plainly in front of you, you shouldn't have to ask, well, how many points was that? How many points did that do? How many? I don't like to, and I try to encourage both myself and my players. Don't tell me how many points of damage you've done. Just tell me that you hit. Describe your hit. Describe it in role play. How you hit the creature. Let's say, oh, I hit the orc in the arm. Right. Now, I'm not using a dice, to determine where you actually hit, but you just want to say, I hit the orc in the arm. I saw how much damage you did. All right. And then I'm going to tell you the result that you see. Right. The orc's arm is half hanging off. He has 2 hit points left. It's half hanging off. He's bleeding profusely.
Oh, yeah.
One more hit, he'll probably go down. Something along those lines. Right. But removing the mechanics from the conversation, from the description, let's say. That to me is moving from, that's still solidly in 2D. Now, the question is, I was expecting this question to come up. So, as far as asking the GM questions, all right, about game mechanics, all right. So, and I've had a very similar scenario to this too. So, you're fighting a lycanthrope, all right, so a were-rat. It's the first time you've ever faced a were-rat before, right? Now, you have a magic sling, a +1 sling, and you have a sling stone, or you have a silver sling bullet. Will that sling do damage to the were-rat if you use just the stone, or do you have to use the silver bullet? All right. Is the +1 magic from the sling applying to actually harming the creature?
The ammunition.
Right. Now, if you've never encountered this situation before as a player, you might ask the DM the rule that he or she is going to apply to that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's a 2D thing, to ask because who are you? The player is asking, but what I would suggest is, the way we would handle this is in our, and I admit to those that are watching, like, this guy sounds super weird. It's true. It is super weird compared to it's pretty simple to just say, hey, does the ammunition, the way we play through stuff like that, where there's some ambiguity as to what the
Right.
rules would, is we always try, and we're not perfect at this, but we try to revert to what the character would know. If the character has no clue, he's never run into a were-rat before,
Mhm.
he's going to act in that scene, in the sewer
Right.
where this thing is coming at him, depending on his the temperament of the character.
Mhm.
I may be just scrambling to get the first thing that I don't even look at what it is. Like, it's silver,
Right.
I put it in, I don't, or I do the other, I don't. And then we try to avoid any of that. Well, how, and then after the session we'll talk and say, so how does that work again? Like, if we didn't
Yeah.
know, then we'll clarify afterwards. And that's because, and this comes back to that, the generations of games, right? In a first generation game, it's expected that you'll have the reference material there, and you'll look up as you go. You'll look up rules, whatever particular rules there are, so that you could, because first generation games, they're just designed to have that. Everyone's supposed to have a book around to look and reference it. It's not like a second generation game would be one where there really is it's more of a unified skill set, or like,
Mhm.
there's not separate mini games or different mechanics in the various things that might happen. So there's not a different mechanic for drowning, or a
Mhm.
different mechanic for
Right.
grappling, or it's just the same mechanic. And therefore it's really not expected that you're going to be looking it up in the book, because it's, once you get the gist of the system, then you don't need to be referencing a table of contents or an index or something to try to find how does that, what's the modifier on this.
Right.
um yeah.
So that's a different element that you just put there that
Mhm.
I never considered.
Mhm.
Like, I don't assume first generation means that you're referencing the rule book.
Right,
Like,
right.
to me, I look at the simplicity of
Yeah.
D&D Beck Me, right? And that character
Sure,
sheet. And I was like,
sure.
there's not enough complexity on this character sheet that you can't memorize every darn thing that's on it, especially for a low level character. And now you can go so much beyond what that character sheet says. I'm not
Yep.
even thinking of, well, if something comes up, then I have to look it up in the rule book. Because to be
Yes.
honest with you, if you're playing like a fighter, there's nothing you need to
Yeah.
look up. It's like,
Well, that's true.
you
I
know,
guess it does depend, and this isn't strictly speaking an OSR title, but I was trying to have a role play game, a role play heavy game, and we try to role play combat too. So people are like, "Oh, well, this is just shopping all the time." No, no, no. We like to role play the whole thing, including
mhm,
combat.
right,
And I was running Weird Frontiers. Great game.
right,
I really love the game, and I've run DCC and I've run MCC as well. But the problem with that, which I still consider that a first generation game, because it's impossible to run Weird Frontiers without referencing the book.
absolutely
If you
impossible.
roll a critical, there's multiple tables. What were
Mhm,
you doing? Were you grappling like a luchador? Was it a firearm critical? Was it a piercing critical? Was it a bludgeoning critical?
yeah,
There's
no, it's
all, and then there's fumble tables, and then there's spell tables, and then there's
right.
spell tables, and it just goes and goes and goes. That, what I found is that, back to the topic of the conversation that we're having, is it possible to role play that? Well, in it's hard to stay in character in games like that, because we have to constantly refer back to the rule. Oh, well, I rolled this. You have to, and the only way it really works, I found, is if you roll that, you get the result on the crit table, then you describe what the character. But then it almost feels like retconning a little bit what you've
Mhm,
done, because you didn't know you were going to roll a 20 until you did roll a 20.
right,
Now you're going back. So I struggle with that.
right.
It's not impossible, but in some cases I think you have to either simplify those tables so that you're not constantly referring to them. We've tried things like little printing them out, so they're just in a little booklet, and then I had all my
Right,
players have a little booklet so they
right.
don't have to. I mean, Weird Frontiers, you have it. It's
Yeah.
it's hundreds of pages. It's a massive book.
It's 900 page. It's a 900 page,
Yeah,
game system.
I
You're
love the
including
Weird
the
Frontiers,
Room of Magic. Yeah.
but it as a first generation title, it's a first generation style of game where it's expected that you're going to need to refer to tables in the book.
Right.
It does make it more challenging to stay in character, and just role play that character without without constantly flipping
Yeah.
chapter this and front of the book and back of the book. And so it can be challenging. So that you can take a game like a very first gen game like basic D&D or advanced, or like those we played Worlds Without Number, which is an OSR title.
Right.
And what we found that worked with Worlds Without Number is that it worked to stay in that role play element and focus on the role play if every player already had a very, very strong grasp on what their character could do. And what I mean by that is I want you to describe what the spell is. I don't want to, we're trying to get away from just, I cast fireball. I cast it. We're like, no, we're trying to describe it so that everyone can build that mental picture and play along with that mental picture. So anyway, that's a long tangent. I'm sorry. I should shut up.
No, it's because I am learning. Like I said, I'm very open to learn and to, and that's another thing, because when I think of first gen, second gen, third gen, fourth gen, even though I know it's not meant to be a chronological, designation, right? Because by that measure, especially adding that component, like you have to use reference, then Weird Frontiers. I mean, my gosh, and you even mentioned bringing out the poker cards that you have to use.
The poker cards and
the chips and the.
Did you ever have anyone play a gambler in that game?
Yes.
Absolute chaos. The gambler
or any gun shooter, but yes, I've run it at conventions, and you have to, even for a convention play where you're not really role playing, obviously, but you're at a convention, you still have to trim that game down. It's like limit the number of classes they can take. I tried to avoid magic as much as I could because I didn't want to bust out that 400-pound tome of magic that you have to carry along.
Oh, it's crazy.
Concept of it. But getting back to the point I was making, first gen is not just old games. First gen is really 5e as a first gen game. All right, because you have to use those books for reference. There's no way you're going to remember everything off of that very complex character sheet on top of an action economy that it has. That's nuts too. So I would think that looking at the different generations, that third generation, which is rules light, would it be fair to say that is the most inducive of role playing than the other generations?
The hard thing about that, and I wasn't as clear on the third gen and fourth gen. The third gen is the issue I have with that is it feels too much like just a pure storytelling exercise. So these would be games like Fate, like where it's not you don't. I think that in order to have what I'm looking for in a role playing game, I want to have some mechanics as well. And I feel like with that third generation movement where it's really just there's really almost no mechanics at all. It's just you build your character by a sentence essentially.
Right.
And I find that if it's too rules light, and we've played some rules light games like DM Scotty's Easy D6. We've done that. The Total Party System, we really like that one. And there's not a ton of rules there, but there's enough rules there that you could. It has some. It's not just a collective storytelling where there's not. I don't like the. I don't like this idea of like Fate where you have Fate dice and it's it's really it's changes for me. It's no longer the
Yeah.
RPG experience.
Yeah,
It's
I got
more
a slightly different
storytelling.
definition than you did for fourth. Like you're
Mhm.
describing fourth to me based on what I
Yeah,
found. Like, here's the definition that I got for fourth. Fourth generation games either have no rules at all or a very light
yeah,
system that consists mostly of guidelines. And some even mention, like some of it even mentioned like a diceless system. All right.
yeah.
Which is a
Diceless systems would
story
be fourth
system.
gen. Yeah,
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
third gen, this is the one that I got. Third generation games are rules like games that allow the player a greater deal of selection in making their character. Um,
Yeah, that's true. I guess what I think there's some overlap here, and I'm not
yeah,
sure if I could draw a clear line between the third and fourth gen. My
right.
understanding of it, because I talked to those that were more knowledgeable about these different generations. If you have a game like Blades in the Dark or something like that, the game, it does necessitate a negotiation between the game master and the and the player, and
Mhm.
those negotiations are typically done out of character. And so I tend to avoid that because I don't
Right.
want to have a out of character negotiation. So at any rate, it's
Yeah.
the I don't mind rules light. Like I said, Easy D6 is a perfectly playable game. Total Party Skills as well. They work fine. I do like to have a little more depth to the mechanics.
Right.
So
Right.
I tend to lean a little more, and not super crunchy or anything like that, but
Hmm.
I like to have a little more mechanics involved.
Right. Yeah, and I've been looking at different, different game systems and everything. I've been just looking at the character sheets because I thought this is the
Yeah,
best way to kind of, narrow it down. And so I was like, all
sure.
right, let me take a look at the basic character sheet. All right.
Good
How
point.
much do you glean about the system directly off that character sheet? And then I went to the next one and I was like, well, let's take a look at Mongoose Traveler. All
Mhm,
right, and
mhm.
then let's take a look at what was the other one I looked at? I looked at GURPS, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
I kind of followed
First
this
gen game
selection
for
too,
sure.
right? I
Yeah.
went from D&D Beck Me basically
Mhm.
to GURPS to Traveler and then the Fallout. All right.
Okay.
So I wanted to kind of see because I know that all of them have skills per se, but D&D Beck Me has basically no skills. There's very very little other than spell casting or whatever. But I'm
Mhm.
talking about skills that they would have to specifically look at to see. Oh, how does
Right. How
tracking
does
work
this
or
skill
something?
work? Yeah. Yeah.
They don't have rangers or any of those specialty classes just yet in the older one. But then when I went to GURPS, I mean, GURPS says, 100 skills that you can potentially take,
Yeah.
and you're not going to remember all of that
No.
without
No.
going to your character sheet to remind yourself. Um, Same thing with Traveler. A little bit less so with the Fallout. I don't know if you're familiar with the
I'm
Fallout
not familiar with that
Fallout
one. No.
one. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I was going to just throw these up there and show them real fast. So I will just try to scan through all of them and give everyone a shot to see what I'm talking about here. So let's go to the first one here is so here is D&D Basic, right? I
Right.
mean, this is if this were a fighter, this is all that you really need. I can actually shrink this down a little bit. That's all you need. All right. There's nothing else going on in this sheet. You don't have to bother with all of this other, which is just items and,
Mhm.
characteristics and stuff like that. It's not
Mhm.
the character sheet itself. So
Right.
that's the basic character sheet. Now let's see if I can bring up the GURPS one. I screwed this one up, didn't I?
Yeah. Or
Um,
look at a Palladium character sheet or something. It's
yeah, yeah.
all crazy.
But anyway, this should be. Oh, I got to do it this way. All right, so let's stop sharing. Let's stop that share. The GURPS one I lost. It was like one of those ones that was asking me to download it in a certain way. And where's Traveler? So here we go with Traveler. All
Mhm.
right. and this is the one from the, basically, but you
Yep.
can see that there's not a tremendous number of skills here because most of them are
No.
duplicates. All right.
Yep.
But there's still a good amount. And there's,
Mhm.
still a lot of different little categories and everything here that you're going to have to take a look at and reference every once in a while. It is not as much as like old gen Call of Cthulhu, let's say, for example. And then
Okay.
the last one, since you're not familiar with it, so I'm happy to show you
Yeah,
this one.
I'm interested to see it.
Yeah, so here is Fallout. All right, so this is a Fallout
Oh,
character
neat.
sheet.
Okay. Yep.
And it basically has your stats along the top, just a few skills.
Right.
Where's there, 15 maybe?
Mhm.
Something like that. And the black checkoffs are the ones that the person would get a critical if they roll below their number, below their
On it.
rank. All right, and the other
Sure.
ones is only on a, rolling a one is a
Mhm.
critical success. All right.
Mhm.
So, and that's the whole character sheet. I mean, so it is
Good.
like, to me, I float to the idea of the more you're off the character sheet, the more you're potentially role playing. All
Mhm.
right. And whether you know whether that's always the case, no, probably not, because you could be off your character sheet and doing something totally disconnected
Right.
to the gameplay that's taking place. Now I know we've played once together. All
We
right.
did. Yeah,
And
we
then,
did.
and
Your audience might be surprised, but yes,
yes,
we
yeah,
have.
we did play once together, and
Mhm.
I got hung up on, and this came up in one of the other videos that I think you were in. You were on someone else's live stream, and verbing. All
Oh,
right.
verbing.
So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So the verbing, and you'll recall that I got hung up on because I don't like to assume when I say I'm going to do something. All right. That means that I am in the process of doing it. And now you know
Right.
that we got into this huge, not you and I, but
Not no, no.
myself and the
Yeah.
game master got into this huge argument over I was like,
Mhm.
no, I'm walking to the door. All right.
Right.
All right. I'm
So
going to walk to the door. It's like, no, he was
right.
like, no, you have to say, I walked to
Yeah.
the door, or I'm
He
at
was
the
quite,
door.
yeah. And here's, I mean, I understand, if I understand correctly, you were saying this way so that so as to leave room
Mhm.
if there was an interruption to that attempted action. Is that correct? Like that
Yes.
you were
Yes.
just saying,
So,
I just want to leave room. Now,
yeah.
uh, what we do, and I think what he was saying is because there is, and I don't need to defend the guy.
Right.
I don't really have any contact with him anymore, but I certainly do encourage players to speak in the present tense, in the
Mhm.
sense that I don't want players to, and myself, I try to avoid this, where I'm listing out all of the things that I'm going to do. I go into the dungeon and I'm going to go into this and I'm going to find this and I'm going to kill a dragon and I'm going to come back and I'm like, okay, well, there's already so many points of failure that could happen there.
Right.
Why don't you just focus on getting off the horse? Like, let's just
Mm.
say I get off the horse, I go to
Right.
my saddlebags, I
Yeah.
pull out my sword,
Mm.
like just trying to be in that set. But I understand what you were getting at is
Yeah.
that
I was like,
you
because
were just saying, look, I need to have some room here so
mm,
that if the game master wants to introduce a complication or an obstacle, or if there
right.
is an obstacle that he's
Right.
already put in that place, then that has its chance to interact. Um,
Yeah, because I
so
kept
yeah,
on pulling it. I was like, part of your action is a movement and then an action. All right.
yes,
And I'm describing the movement. Now
yes,
I could step on a pit trap, I could do something that
yeah,
interferes with that movement. And that's
mhm,
where I was kind of coming from.
mhm,
And he kept on saying
yeah.
future tense, future tense. And I'm like,
Yeah,
it's
he was catching your going to, I'm going
yes,
to,
yes. And
as
I was like,
I haven't begun yet. When
yeah.
is it starting?
Yeah.
When I use a firm, and this may be a new term to some of your audience, when I talk about um, verbing, and this isn't, to be fair, to give credit where it's due, this came from Matt of Tomb of Lime Gaming. Highly recommend his channel. And he talked about that. He coined the phrase verbing. And what we
Right.
talk about is avoiding speaking in second person when we're the one running the game. So when the game master or referee or judge, we have to be very careful because it's so easy to fall into this. You do this, and then you do this, and you
Mhm.
walk to the door, and then all of a sudden I'm wresting control away from your character
Yes.
so that it becomes my character. And
Right.
this is a huge area of focus for us. Um, and it's a bit of a challenge because we
Mhm.
have bad habits, myself included, where it's just so easy to say, okay, well, you guys go to the tavern, and okay, you're here, but who decides they go to the tavern?
Right.
They decide they go to the tavern. They decide.
Mhm.
So we try to avoid that
Right.
verbing.
Yeah.
Now the problem is that some game systems rely on that, and they rely on the game master giving out of character information to the
Right.
players, and that can be a challenge. It can be a
Yeah.
challenge, for example, in I love Savage Worlds, but to role play in Savage Worlds is a real challenge because there's so much out of character mechanics that have to be communicated.
Mhm.
Uh, Bennies and other things like that really do make role playing more challenging.
Yeah.
Can you
Um,
do it in it? Yeah, I think you can, but
yeah.
you have to you have to sit down with the players. Everyone has to decide, okay, how are we going to handle this so we can stay in character? And that's the same for
Yeah.
any system, I suppose, but some make it more challenging.
Yeah. I think that that's the main thing is that you have to constantly remind, or at least initially you have to remind everyone that this is the expectation, and you
Yes.
of course have to buy into it as well. Everyone needs buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for certain. Um, I know that very early on in my AD&D campaign, that lasted a little over 2 years, and very early on, I tried to impress upon my players that I were going to hold them to the knowledge that their characters would have, and not theirs.
Good. Good
I
for
didn't
you.
allow
Yeah.
any metagaming,
Right.
and now they were very experienced players and they caught on fast, and the were rat situation was a situation that was very, you know, very apropos for, the example that I used for tonight, but it was very similar. It was a person casting a speak with animals to talk to a were rat. And I
Sure.
says, all right, you cast a spell, it didn't work. you know you can't speak
Mhm.
to him,
Mhm.
and he was like, well, why not? And of course broke out of the character and went into this
Right.
whole thing. Oh no, I cast a spell. And I says, yeah, but a were-rat's not an animal, it's a monster. All right,
Yeah.
and so that spell won't work on him, but my character would know that. I says, no, he wouldn't. It's the first time you've ever encountered one. You've never cast that spell before. So chalk it up as a learning experience. You'll never make that mistake again. All right. And then
Exactly.
moving forward, it
Mm.
was a lot easier for everyone to just now, as a thing like giving players information, like 6 8 months later, if I remembered that their character experienced something but they didn't, I would remind them. All
Mm.
right. Because their character knew that, and I would
Mm.
assume that the character, would still remember that because the character experienced it, even though 8 months
Yeah.
later, the player is no longer connected to that memory, as much, and so I guess that's a form of verbing in a sense of just reminding them, hey,
You
your
remind. Yeah.
character would know
Yeah.
this. And for those kind of breaks, like if that prevents me from being a 4D game master, because every once in a while I will step out and be like, hey, you know what? Your character would know this, remember?
Sure.
And then go back into the role playing, because I never felt that, you know, um, I never felt that a brief break
Mhm.
in the momentum doesn't allow you to get right back into momentum again very, very quickly.
True. I mean, for some
Yeah.
people, they can come in and out. Um,
Yeah.
what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is
Mm.
I'm trying to stay in character for as long as we
Yeah.
can and minimize those breaks. In the example that you gave of the were rat and the spell, um, I wouldn't like we just start off with a table convention that if there's any question as to a
Mhm.
rules interpretation, we will handle that after the
Afterwards.
session.
Yes.
And if and we want to be fair and we don't want to be,
Mm.
you don't want to be a jerk to people.
Mm.
So but we'll handle that out of that. Now when it comes to, you raise another very interesting topic, which is what about where there's a disconnect between what the character knows and what the player knows, and what the
Mhm.
character would obviously remember and what the player's forgotten because it was 3 months or 4 months ago,
Right.
and it's potentially an important thing for them to remember.
Right.
It can be tricky, and you know what? Maybe the solution is you just quietly, as a quick aside,
Mhm.
this re- your the image of such and such returns to
Mm.
your mind's eye. You
Mhm.
could get into that. You're going to have to do some maybe second person speaking
Yeah.
there.
You could role
Or
play it. Yeah. You could role play it
you
out,
role
or
play it. Like you could have an NPC that was already there in that same place, or maybe one of the other players remembers and
and
says,
that's
"Hey,
usually
wait a
that's
second, what?"
usually been my experience. Another
Yeah,
player will
and
remind him.
exactly. And if it can be handled without
Oh,
coming out
excuse
of
me.
that, being speaking as the character, being in
Yeah.
character, then so much the better. I think that for my preference, which is to focus on the role play side of
Mm.
these games, then I much prefer that if it can happen. And what
Yeah.
we've been, because we've been experimenting with all these different games to see, can we be in character for this whole game session and play Wendy's RPG? Can we do it? Is
Yeah.
it possible? Can we do this with more of a crunchy system
Mhm.
like Bastard Sword is, or can we do it with Traveler? Can we do it with Worlds Without Number? And we're experimenting, and what we find is that oftentimes we'll come to these mechanics, and there's some question as to, well, how are we going to handle this? We're going to do a horror game. How are we going to handle losing sanity and not
Mhm.
descend into you are terrified? Like we're because we're trying to avoid that. Just saying, well, your character is terrified now. I want the players to decide that on their own based on the roles that they're failing in the system. So they then role play out being terrified without having me to tell them, because they already know the dice mechanic. They know their sanity level. They
Right.
roll. They
Yeah.
already know it. Like you were saying earlier, where you don't necessarily want to hear the result of the dice roll. If it's a failure and the player knows, then the player describes that.
Right.
And we've done that too. And I
Yeah.
do think that works. It's an interesting style of
Yeah.
play that
Yeah.
I hope more people want to try. It's a
Yeah.
challenge, but it's
Yeah.
rewarding.
It's part of the reason why I don't use the morale system, because the
Mm.
morale system is too freaking random. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I let my players decide their own morale.
Oh, of course.
They will quickly
Of course.
learn, when should I run, when should I fight, when should I try to
There's
negotiate or
ways of,
whatever.
and
You know,
that's a great, you can bring up a great point, because
yeah,
what better way to communicate morale than to have other characters in the world respond by panicking or
right,
dropping their
yeah,
weapons and running. They're going to try to save their skin. Same with enemies. I mean,
yeah,
enemies. The fighter brutally lays low, like just destroys a goblin. The other goblins, I mean, yes, some could go into a blood rage, but
mm,
depending on how gruesome
yeah,
that death was, I mean, they're probably going to want to preserve their lives
yeah,
unless there's some other
yeah,
thing going on. It may not require a roll of 2d6 or 1d6 or whatever it is, roll under their morale or over, depending on what the system is. Um, I
yeah,
don't mind. I don't mind some of that. Um, if I don't have it in my head,
yeah,
what's the motivations for this particular monster? Maybe they would run, maybe they wouldn't.
right,
And they're having a quick mechanic to that can easily determine that's okay. But as you say, you if everyone has a pretty good handle on the world and how
right,
deadly it is, it may not even need a roll before people are like, ah,
Yeah, no,
let's
I
just run
I,
away.
I let
This
him I
isn't
let him
good.
learn that lesson the hard way. It's like you get killed, you get killed. You know, if you should have ran and you
And
didn't, you know. But again, I'm playing with very experienced players, so they kind of know. You know, it's like no, we're second level. We're not going to get the attention of that wyvern flying over us. You know,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
that was pretty much the situation that we had a couple
mhm,
weeks ago. It was like,
mhm.
oh, he didn't notice us. Great. We're just gonna stay low and hide and be quiet, and hopefully
Sure.
he will fly off. You know, um, but yeah, that's the glories of random encounters sometimes, and in
Yeah,
systems that
yeah,
are not,
sure.
you know, that are not CR balanced systems. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're hiking in the woods, there
Yeah.
might be a grizzly there. It
Yeah.
might just be a badger, but it could be a grizzly. So it happens.
Yeah.
But if
So,
if it constantly causes us to have to open up the books and go check a rule or check
yeah.
another table, or I mean, it just it slows everything down, and
Yeah. Yeah. Now
I think it.
my issue is because I don't have that. I really don't have my players opening up books or looking up things or anything like that. And we've pretty much gotten into it now. We've been together for almost 3 years, so they kind of
That
know.
helps. That helps
Yeah.
for sure.
Yes, and
That
that's
helps.
another thing. Like once you get everyone's kind of groove and they kind of know
Yep.
where I'm coming from and what my expectations are and everything. But you know, I do have players who will um you know who will get into the banter, you know, and
Mhm.
where, you know, and that's because of the comfort level and everything like that. And you know, things do come up, and then every once in a while it's like, all right, come on, let's get back, you know, let's get back into
Right.
this. We want to accomplish some things, and
Mhm.
you know, but that's the one thing that, you know, if any area I really want to try to curtail that is like, all
Mhm.
right, listen, we can bullshit all we want the first half hour, you know, while waiting for everybody to
Right.
get there and get ready and get all the
That's what we
housing
do.
going and everything. And I will
Yep, we do
definitely
that.
do 20 minutes after
Oh,
the session.
sure.
But in the
Mhm.
session, let's just focus on, you know, objectives, you know, and
Yeah,
you know, these are the objectives. This is what you're
that's
kind,
right.
you know, and
Mhm.
we'll do a recap beforehand, you know, just to kind of say, and then even before we get into character and get into session, right? And we say, all right, open scene, boom, we're in. Um, you know, I'll say, listen, I know what your plans are. Are you still going to go with that plan? All right, yeah, that's what we're intending to do. That way, when we hit roll, you know, and now there's no more rehashing that. This is what your characters are moving towards
Yeah.
doing, and we can try to stay focused on that. So, yeah, I would like to try to get it where we have less interruptions and whatnot, but
Mhm.
you know, yeah, that's just something that I think will move us further into 3D, you know,
Sure.
than we might be from time to time, you know, and
I
maybe
I
touch it.
love banter. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we have like Phil, for example. He's fantastic at banter,
Hmm.
and we've had some great games where we've had inter-party conflict. Like one of
Right.
our games, I straight up tried to shoot Phil's character. I was
Right.
done with him. He was trying to kill the rest of us.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was great.
Yeah.
But we don't come out of character while that
Correct.
banter's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that I think when we're talking about role playing, it can get a bad rap because it's just like, oh, it's just talking around the table, like we're all just talking. And our solution for that, and I think there is a solution for that, is that you have to keep your try to well, just like in the game you and I played, your
Mm.
turn is short. Your turn
Yeah.
is just where you are in the world and what you're doing and maybe what you're saying if you're saying something, but it should be short. And it you shouldn't we talk Max has a term that he uses called turnflation, and that's the sense of, okay, as you're role playing, got to be careful. Are you hogging all the turns? This was usually they had to have this term because of me, so
Right.
they because I would have a tendency to just hog all the turns.
Right.
And if we can keep that flow going, so in other words, you in a sense you're role playing in initiative all the time.
Hmm.
And that makes sure that things do still happen in the game. But some systems, some systems have, especially when it comes to the tactical natures of these games, you'll have um, where you have to go with, say, you have to roll initiative every round, like, so you're constantly changing up the order, and that kind of mechanic, it can, again, it bogs things down, and what should be the most dynamic and exciting portion, when like combat, like people are going to die here, that
Hmm.
should be exciting and dynamic and
Right.
fast.
Yeah.
And some systems, they add these they add these elements that I think they they actually take away from the goal of the game, which is to have this super tense, very,
Right.
and it ends up just being a very slow chess game.
Yeah.
And I think role
Well,
play solves that.
yeah, that's the multi-layered action economy
Yeah, like,
games
is
that
this a
are like,
bonus
oh,
action? And
this
this
has
is,
got bonus action and counter action and this and
well, I
that
grew
and
up on,
oh,
like,
you
I
know,
didn't grow up on it, but
yeah,
I had spent many, many years playing
mm,
3.5 and
yeah,
Pathfinder First Edition.
mm,
And of course it's all Swift, and
mm,
there's all these huge number of types of actions. Well,
mm,
our solution for that, and I think this kind of comes back to again, I'm trying to come back to your main topic. I
right,
don't want to derail it. Um, in some cases, what we've done is, in order to role play in some games where they're not quite as friendly for in character play,
hmm,
we just have to trust one another that you're using the action economy appropriately. Like, so I'm running a Heroes Unlimited game right now. Well, talk about a complicated
right,
action
right,
economy,
right,
right?
yeah, yeah,
I just have to trust that my players understand that some actions are going to take 2 attacks, and some are going to take 3, and some are going to
hmm,
take 4, and some are going to take all of them.
right,
And if they describe trying to dodge out of the way, well, that's going to take an action. And if they,
mm,
they have, I offload a lot of that, because I won't play the game with people that are going to cheat.
mm,
So we have to have a high degree. This goes back to your comment. Well, your game is working better because you've been gaming with the same people for 3 years. Obviously, you have a higher degree of
mhm.
trust that you just can let them take care of that. It's good.
Yeah. I want to get to something that Sable's putting out here, and just say that having different understandings and not having a universal understanding of some of the terminologies and everything, that should get unpacked in session zero,
Sure.
or pre-game
Yeah.
session kind
Yeah.
of conversations. But yeah, I think that, like I said, I completely agree. If your players and your game master are not on the same page of what terms mean, then
Yeah. Then you're gonna have
you're
trouble.
you're,
Yeah.
you're gonna have you're gonna have
You're gonna have
trouble right
trouble.
from the get go,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it might take you a while to get caught up to being on the same
Absolutely.
page on things. So it's
And you
like,
got to
yeah, that
practice things too. Like, you got to practice
yeah,
it. So, like, what we'll do is we'll get together at our session zero, and then we'll have some examples. Well, how is this going to work when we do this? Like, how are we going to, how again, we're what our current experiment with Max's game that he's working on
mm,
is just how much granularity in rules can we have and still be completely in character all the time. And his is quite, he's got almost 100 skills in that game. He's got
yeah,
a bunch of different attributes. It's a dice pool system, but it has some interesting quirks to it.
right,
So you have to practice it. Um,
mm,
and it's something that we continue to practice. And
yeah,
people can see that. You can come to my channel or any of the guys and see
mm,
our games and see us experimenting, seeing how we're
right,
trying to do this.
yeah.
But,
Um,
yeah.
Again, so Sable Phoenix, Shadow Dark, which I've been running now for quite some
Mhm.
time. I have a campaign. I've run it at conventions and everything. Um, yes, it does have certain systems that to make it a lot easier to just focus on role playing. So you don't have to think about initiative. Sometimes you could even run a session initiative. You roll it once, and that's the way it's going to go throughout the entire session.
Sure.
Or you could do it scene by scene or whatever, but you're certainly not
Yep.
re-rolling initiative every round. And any system that gets you away from dice rolling leaves more room for for role play instead, rather than ROL.
I will take a little bit of a contrarian
Yeah.
point on that. I don't think the dice themselves prevent role play. What
Mhm.
I do think what hurts role play efforts is more when um so there are times where do we really need a dice roll for this? Eh, it's just how complicated is the resolution of that dice roll. So
Mm,
back to the weird frontiers, like
yeah.
it's just a d20. You add this number or that number. You may have some modifiers on it, whatever it is, but then you have to consult a chart, and the charts change, and so the resolution isn't fast. I want fast resolution
Hmm.
of mechanics,
Right.
and not necessarily always rules light, just fast resolution. I'm
Right.
very interested in Shadow Dark. Sadly, I missed out on the Kickstarter, and it's out of it. They're still. I don't think
So they
it's
got it
not in
back in
print.
print again. Yeah, it's
Is it
back in
back in
print.
print? Okay, because I went to go order it from
Yeah.
Arcane Library,
Yeah.
and it was saying it wasn't in print, but or
Oh,
they're waiting pre-order, I guess is what
if
they
that
were
was a
saying.
couple days ago, I think
Oh,
they
they
got a
did? Okay.
shipment a couple days ago.
Well, I
Um,
imagine with the awards they've won, then
yeah,
they're
yeah, I'm sure
but
that they sent out a bulk.
but
Um,
I'm certainly interested in it, and
yeah,
so I can't speak to it specifically because I do not own it, but
yeah,
I would like to
it
run it
does
at some point.
streamline. It does streamline a lot of things. The other thing is that most of your features for your class are passive, and so you don't have to think about them. They're just automatically built in and cooked
Well,
into the books.
I've tried to
And
watch a few of the sessions, Shadow Dark
mhm,
sessions, and I know I know just the superficial
mhm.
on Shadow Dark that there's a real time torch thing,
Yes,
and when I heard that, my first thought was, well, then everything should be real time. Like that's that not in the sense that we're gonna be real time for a 3 hour ride to the into the forest, not that way. But once in the dungeon, if the torches extinguish real time, then I'd like to try to keep. And we try to play more or less real time, um, so that things are fast. So I'd like to
right.
give it a shot. Certainly am interested
Yeah,
in
and
it.
so I've used the real time torch. Every time I've run it when they've been indoors and such, and um, it's you just have to conceptual like you have to have it really theater of the mind in essence of
Sure.
saying, well, how much time has actually passed like for our characters? The same 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and so they will conceptualize that, yeah, it actually took us 1 hour to go through these 5 rooms, because in every room we did this or that or whatever. And and it really became something that you know um was almost organic and by accident, that it was like that. Just like, going back to an argument, years ago when the one-to-one timing and everything
Oh, sure.
was all the craze and brouhaha over that. And I was running my AD&D first edition, and even with travel and doing everything, we were probably about, you know, our characters within their experiences were probably about 11 months in, and we've played that number of weeks of sessions, and I
Sure.
was like, yeah, it might not be matching up exactly, but it's
No.
damn close. And it's not like we actually said, hey, you know what, you're laid up for
Mhm.
3 days, and so now we normally only play once a week anyway. So it was
Mhm.
like, so you're going to be able to recover and do whatever. And it just shocked me. I was like, I don't have to like keep track of this and keep down,
It's already kind of that
on a
way.
thing. It was
Yeah.
already kind of happening anyway,
Mhm.
and I do try to at least mentally, treat it like, yeah, you were in this for about 4 hours, and our session ran about 4 hours, and so we're going to stop at this point, and this is where you're at. It's like, that's why West Marches didn't work for me, because West Marches,
Okay.
you have to go back to a safe space
Okay.
to, every single. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how the hell do you get anywhere? I couldn't wrap my head around. I was like, all right, you're going 10 miles out and you have to come 10 miles back all in one session. You're never
Mhm.
exploring anywhere in the world. You're never getting any
Mhm.
far until you find that next town if you're lucky enough. And
Sure.
so I think real time works really well with certain things, and I like other kinds of management. Like, if you have 20 arrows, the player. I just came up with this conversation the other day during my live stream, and I was like, "You're going to have 20 toothpicks, right, in your
Yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
and
That's a
when
good
you're,
tool. I
when
would
you're
consider something like that.
when you're firing your arrows off and everything, just slide your toothpicks over,
Yeah.
and that's a good way. And I think that's an important
Yep.
kind of, you know, um,
Mhm.
measurement, to use.
Well,
Um,
I agree. I think timekeeping is very
yeah.
important because I don't want I don't want players to feel like their character can just be teleported around like some
Mhm,
disembodied head that can just floats around wherever it needs to
mhm.
go. Like no, there's that to me breaks the believability of the
Yeah.
world. And so the solution for that, I feel the solution for that is to have a strict measurement of time.
Right.
And the problem I have, the reason I don't do a straight one-to-one game is I don't have time in my life to do a lot of play by post for the like
Mm,
in between game sessions. If we're playing weekly, I
right.
don't have a lot of time to respond to player emails saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what my character is doing for these 4 or 5 days or 7 days before we play again," and then have me do the resolution of that. Like I would have to have whatever I need to have the resolve. There was a question there about would a diceless system be best for role play,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
and
Yes. That's right.
um, I've never played a diceless system. I'm not terribly interested in a diceless system because I do like having a dice mechanic to resolve the uncertain elements of the world.
Mhm.
I much prefer that. It's
Yeah.
just a preference. I've never tried one, so I can't really speak to it other than I don't think
Mm.
dice are the problem per se. It's dice are fine, especially if it's a resolution that can happen quickly where you don't have to, or we're rolling initiative. How long does it take for us to roll initiative? In some systems,
Mm.
it just goes crazy. So anyway,
On this point here, Sable, several people that I've had direct conversations with have shot this whole thing down. That's not how Gary ran his table, though. All right. Luke Gygax told me this. Ernie Gygax told me this. Frank Metzner told me this. And Kelly Foote has told me this. All of them played at Gary Gygax's table. I'll leave that for the Broisar
cool. Yeah, I
to worry over. That's a big argument that I've had. Thank you, Phil.
I like it too.
Phil the
Oh, I
Thrill.
think that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah,
Bill
yeah, it
is
was
a
one of
phenomenal
my very
player.
rare, brilliant ideas. Where I was like, "Hey, just use toothpicks,"
It's
and
a
then I was
brilliant.
like,
I
"Or you
love
could
it.
use
I think that's
something else,"
great.
and I was like, "No, toothpicks works perfect." I was like, "Why would you use something else?" It was like a toothpick is a perfect representation,
Yeah.
of arrows. But nice part of real time
Paul
torch is that
makes a good comment
there's
here.
moving.
I like
Yes.
it. I like this comment, Paul. The nice part of the real time torch is that it keeps players moving.
Yeah.
This is such an important thing that it, I do feel, regardless of the system you're playing, and this is why we keep experimenting with role play,
Right.
um, in character role play for different systems, is that when you can't just resort to going out of character and just saying as the player asking a bunch of questions as a player
Mm.
to the game master, it does force you to keep moving,
Mhm.
uh, because you're going to get a turn every 30 seconds or something
Yeah.
along those lines, and your turn is where are you moving if you're moving. I mean, you can always say, "Oh, I'm just going to go have a shower or whatever," and then the
Right.
game master may not come back to you for the time that it takes for you to have a
Right.
shower, whatever, or for the hot water to run out or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do like that because
It,
we
it
like
will
to.
especially it will especially keep them moving when they run out of light and now
Yes,
they're ready to
yes,
complete, because everything else in the world that they're facing can see in the dark. They can't,
yes,
so
yeah,
yeah, they will be at an extreme disadvantage, and that's what it's designed to do. Another thing along those lines, when I have players that are spending too much time, trying to
yes,
think about, you lose your turn. All
yeah,
right.
yeah, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
you did
That's
nothing this
absolutely
round. We're
fine.
going next
Yeah.
in the initiative line.
Hmm.
Because I've had a couple of magic user players in particular. They're the ones that get hung up on which spell to
Totally.
cast. And I love that. I mean, they were great players and everything like that. It's just the nature of their class sometimes, and they get like really tied on to something. That's why I can't wait for Castles and Crusades to come out with their spell card decks. That way
Right,
they just have
right.
the
That would
spell
be a
cards in front of
yeah.
them. And but it's like, no, don't debate it. Just either just do.
Mhm.
On several
Yeah, I
occasions
that's
I have to
yeah,
tell.
that's yeah,
Yeah,
that I think that can also be somewhat alleviated. That problem can be somewhat alleviated if they are in character the whole time, because then they're
yeah,
not coming out
yeah,
from they're outside of the character's perspective now. They're now the player looking down at
exactly.
their avatar as it
Yeah,
moves through the
mhm,
grid and trying to decide what the best combination. To me, that feels more like playing Dota or like League
yeah,
of Legends or something like
mhm,
that. I'm just trying to hit, not is it League of, I think that's what it's called. And
yeah,
then where you're just moving from a God's eye view down. Well, like this is the perfect, the
mm,
optimized spell for the moment. I much prefer it when my players that are playing casters are panicking and they're pulling whatever arcane thing they can to try
right,
to, or
yeah,
whatever it may be. That just seems so much more believable to me than I
right,
always have the perfect spell for the perfect moment.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe you do.
um,
Maybe that's your character. I don't know. But be in character while you're doing it.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm not saying that you were saying it. I'm just saying that that quote of Gary's comes up all the time. And when I've asked people that know, that actually played with him, they were like, "Nah, he didn't keep to that." Um,
There's always a difference between our words
for
and
well,
practice.
for his
That's true.
wargaming tables, yes, but
Sure.
not his, when he has 25 players at a table, then yes, his wargaming, yes, but not his D&D, um, home game. So anyway, let's see.
We're much more
What
of,
was-
as I understand it, from I've only read Playing at the World, but so I haven't read the Elusive Shift yet. But my
uh,
understanding is that our what our little group is doing is we're trying to lean more into an Arneson style of play, where
right.
it's than a Gygaxian model. Nothing
Hmm.
against it. It's just that
Right.
we're much more focused on the role play side of things than
Right.
the wargaming elements.
Well,
And I
Arneson's,
don't dispute that they're
yeah,
there. Like the
yeah,
wargaming element is there, obviously, but we're not focused as much on that.
yeah. Arneson's rules were all in his head. There was nothing
Yeah,
written. So it was
yeah.
like, so it was a very rules light or whatever. And um, I mean, I don't know if you watched The Secrets of Blackmore, but watching
I have
that,
not.
I
No.
was trying to figure out how he did it. But then when I played in Frank Metzner's game last
Mhm.
January, sitting right next to him, he ran the entire session with just 2d6. That's all
Yeah.
he rolled, and I think that's pretty much Arneson's system,
Right.
and it's like things only happen if they're like a 6 and a 1 happens, or maybe
Mhm.
doubles or whatever he's using, and then with
Yep.
the same color die. So it's not like he was using two different color die, unless he can visibly
Yeah.
see which one was which when he rolled it. But that's all he did, was just 2d6 the entire session.
Sure.
So they had some kind of a very, very simplistic, yeah, thumbs up,
Sure.
thumbs down kind of thing, or only on doubles, something
Yeah.
positive happens on
Yeah.
doubles or
So it's fast. It's
whatnot.
fast. Yeah.
Very,
I
very
like
fast,
I like that.
and very, very cut and dry. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, because everything was like, if you failed, you died. It was like there was no,
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
yeah, you got hit, you're dead. It's very interesting. I recommend both watching the document and buying the book. Yes, absolutely. I both. So yeah, that's a must see. I mean, just to really see how the whole thing came together. And it wasn't a one-sided depiction either. It wasn't like because I was expecting, oh, this might be very anti-Gygax because they had the
Mhm.
lawsuit and everything like that.
Right,
No, it
of
was
course.
very, very balanced and very, and even finished off that they made amends later on in life, and
Mhm.
everything was maybe not exactly copacetic, but everything was still
Yeah, they
on.
mended
They mended
the big they
the
mended the bridges a little bit. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's so much to think about when you're running games or you're playing as a player, which I don't get enough experience. So that was probably when we played the last time. That was the
Was that the last time that you were a play? No, you've played.
player.
Yeah.
Um, no, I was a player in another,
Mhm. Oh, and
CNC
Frank.
campaign
Oh, nice.
afterwards, but not even that much. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So it's like I'm 95% the game master. I very rarely get a chance to play, except for at conventions and everything.
Right.
At conventions I play, and there again, you're not so much. Um, I'm usually playing systems I'm not familiar with.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
that's where I
Okay.
first came into contact with Weird Frontiers. And that's the first time that I played Savage Worlds as well.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I always try to play a new game system. So I'm never going there as, oh, I'm going to role play my way through this thing. I'm going there to learn a new game system.
Sure.
So I'm more system
It's
oriented when I,
more like a game tutorial type
yeah,
thing than yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but um, but yeah, I mean, so there's all these different terms and everything, and I think that everyone, like Sable Phoenix said, there's no universal terms.
No, that's
To
true.
me,
That is very true. And I guess my closing thoughts on this, because I don't want to monopolize. You probably have other people that want to come on and give their
oh,
view.
anybody can come on
Um,
in. I'll
yeah.
actually throw it up there again, just to.
So I was just going to say that it's very true. Definitions are important if we're going to, especially if we're trying to align what we're looking for. We have to
Mhm.
decide on the definitions that we'll all accept. And for us, in our little group, which is
Mm,
an open group, so anyone who's kind of interested, check out our channels, see what we're doing, see
mm,
if that's something that interests you. Uh, our group is focused on in character play. That means we
yeah,
want to be role playing the whole time,
hmm,
and so we set a lexicon to describe what that is, how what do we mean by these terms, which can have different meanings, of
yeah,
course, but what do they mean for us in the context of the game? And then we like to play around with that. Well,
right,
what does it mean for this game, this particular
mhm,
game system? Are we going to try a 5e game? Can we even do that? What is it going to look like? What do we have to leave out? What can we? And we may come to the
yeah,
conclusion that there's some things that we just can't.
right,
And it's too much of a first generation game where you everyone has to be in the books all the time. It can't be more of that, like you were describing the Frank Metzner with the
yeah,
2d6,
right, yeah,
where it's just fast.
yeah. You're
Yeah,
not going to be
so
able to
that's
pull it off in Rollmaster. I
no,
have
or like
never.
Rollmaster or Hackmaster,
Yeah.
which I Hackmaster is kind of a hilarious thing. It's very difficult. I'm finding it very difficult to do in Palladium with their
Hmm.
system. Uh, it would have been easier if it was more of a unified system. They have a completely like they have a D20 mechanic when it comes to combat and saving throws but then all the skills are a roll under percentile mechanic, and the two don't overlap at all.
Right.
So it can be very challenging.
Yeah, if you have disparate rules, like you have rules for one thing and not another, that's a mess.
It's a mess, and it frustrates role play in that now players have to come out of character
Mhm.
to ask those questions of the game master. How do I do this again? Because
Yeah.
they don't want to cheat,
Right.
but at
Yeah.
the same time, every time that happens,
Yeah.
and to your point earlier, yes, you can have brief moments of I've forgotten what is that again, and those
Mm.
that are brave enough to watch our videos will see that we do sometimes have elements where like, I'm sorry, I don't remember. What do I roll? Do I roll a D8 for initiative, or is it a D6? I can't remember.
Yeah.
We do sometimes have that, but in some game systems, it's just so convoluted.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
assumed that you're going to you have the game master's role is to interpret rules and communicate rules to the players. Well, but that's all player to game master. That's not a in character experience anymore.
Yes.
It's out of the character.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's why, like you're saying, like a unified system would be like a target number system. All right.
mhm.
Most game
Yeah,
systems,
that's
like Castles and
yeah,
Crusades, it's like you
yeah.
know what your target number is. You hit the target number, you succeeded. If you didn't, you failed.
We were doing Castles and Crusades, and it
Yeah.
works. You can be in character all the
Mhm.
time in Castles and Crusades. Rick 28 millimeter RPG, who was running
Yeah.
a Castles and Crusades campaign, which I hope
Yeah.
we go back to because I really enjoyed my Dirt Priest and Harn. Uh, I really like that guy. So I want to go back and play that character again
Mhm.
because I feel like I was really getting into that character. Um, but it works. Or another one that works is a D100 system where it's a roll under. Okay, well
Yeah. That's
I mean
easy. Yeah.
that's easy.
Yeah.
Um, I like that there's mechanics there. I like that there's skills. I
Mhm.
think that you can, if you've got good players, you can role play and still have classes. But boy, that's hard
Mm.
because there's this default of you're no longer a believable character. You're just a job description.
Yeah.
And I don't find those characters very exciting. Oh, I'm just
Right.
a thief. Well,
Yeah.
like I'm interchangeable with any other thief.
Yeah.
It
Well,
sounds if to me it's almost like a lit RPG, like where you
right.
just you've probably
Yeah.
if you have you ever listened to those? They're
Yeah.
hilarious. My
Yeah.
favorite one is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Have you ever listened to that?
Yeah.
Go it's an audiobook.
Years
It's
ago, a
Dungeon Crawler
long
Carl.
time ago. Yes.
Hilarious.
It's a green thumbnail, right? Like
Oh, yeah, it's
I know
just
that
so
one. Yes.
funny. And it's a hoot. It's just hilarious. But to me, that's not interesting to role play because I'm just role playing the class, and I'd rather role play someone that has quirks and
Right.
maybe some ambition or a lack of ambition or something, but something that makes them more believable as a fictional living character that
Yeah.
I can get into their head.
So
So
there's
yeah,
a question for you. So you guys did Harn in 4D?
we sure did.
Yeah.
We
But
sure
using
did.
the Castles and Crusades system.
Castles and Crusade system. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
It's fantastic.
that's a very streamlined system. All right.
It
And
works. It works.
and again, most of the character class abilities are first level based, every fourth level and everything, and most of them are passive. So
Mhm.
again, you're not buried too much into your character sheet, and there's very little for you
No.
to reference except for spellcasters, where it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
player,
Exactly.
you know,
And the thing is, I was playing a caster, right? So I'm playing a cleric, a dirt priest cleric. And
mm,
so I had some homework to do before I could play in the game. And this is the other thing. It's we're not against having depth of rules as
mhm.
ones that are committed to role playing. Um, we just expect that everyone's going to take the time to bone up on everything. And so
Well,
I had no experience with Harn at all
yeah.
before this game. And so Rick sent me a number of reference materials that I
Mm,
had to go through and make notes for myself
yeah,
so that I
do your
could
homework.
do my homework. And that's fair. I don't think that only the game master has to do homework. I think the
Right.
players have to do some too. So
Yeah, it's well, that's another thing. I mean, it's one of the things that I would certainly impose upon as an expectation right from session zero. With any
yes.
new players that I have coming to them, these are my expectations, that you know your character and you know what your character can do. All right. And have that pretty well locked down before we even begin playing. Second expectation: when it's not your turn, you're paying attention to what is going on.
Oh,
Right?
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, or
you
you're
have
out.
to be
Get out of
you
my
have to be
game.
ready
Give
when it's time for your character's turn, whatever
Mhm.
that actually appears like. Be fast, be bold, and move on.
Yep.
You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And I've had to make that
Take
reminder
risks.
every once in a
Yeah.
while. Yeah, take risks, be bold. I said
Yeah.
I will never totally party kill the entire party because you
Yeah.
acted boldly. Only
Well,
stupidly, but not boldly.
yeah.
There's a difference, you know.
Yeah. I
Um,
should qualify that. Like when
yeah.
I say take risks,
Hmm.
I'm not talking about being suicidal with your like
Right.
disposable characters. I'm not talking about that. What
Hmm.
I when I with my in-person group, what I really want them to do is I want them to take the risk of being something other than themselves.
Hmm.
Take the risk of being that person for 2 hours, 3 hours, and maybe making the wrong decision or losing your nerve and running away or doing something stupid
Hmm.
because in the moment that's what that character would do. And those are so memorable when those experiences
Yeah.
happen.
Hmm.
Those are they're burned. It becomes
Yeah.
this um indelible mark on that gamer's history of gaming. Like, oh, there
Yeah.
was this one time, and it wasn't that one time where maybe there were dice involved, like, oh, and just in that clutch moment, and he rolled and he got an overwhelming success, or even better, an overwhelming failure. And those are all good. I like those a lot. Take those risks. It's okay. It's a
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of memorable moments that are from player character mistakes that
Yes.
are
Yes.
just, they're those little unexpected gems that you're going to talk about for years.
Yes.
And
And you're not going to talk about those times where you had to say you were asking questions to the game master. You're never,
right,
that's not part of that.
yeah,
Well, can I see a window? Can I do this? Can I do that? No, 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 no.
yeah,
That's not that. That's all out of character.
yeah,
Like we like to explain who is your character talking to at
yeah,
that moment? Like where is this
yeah.
disembodied voice that's giving you all the answers to help you try to solve the scene? But
If they're
I
smart,
yes, and that's yeah.
they're playing a cleric character, and I said, I'm asking my guy, my deity for
Yes,
guidance
exactly.
or everything.
Well,
Yeah,
okay, so they're praying for guidance from a
yes.
divine source. Fair enough, but I want them to role play that so that they can, and they don't have to have funny voices or anything like that. I don't do voices. I'm not very good at voices, but yeah, you
So
can
that's
still
the
be in
Catholic
character.
Great Crusades group.
It is, yeah. That's our group, and
So yeah,
it was
they
it
have
was a
to go put
blast.
your link in, and I'll certainly do that. I will link into the as the first post on this once it finalizes. Uh, a link to, I hope links work. I'll put the name of your YouTube channel so they
Oh,
can
that's very
find you
generous
that
of
way.
you. Thank you. That's very
Yeah,
generous.
yeah, because there's links. YouTube has a thing about links. They treat
They
all
do.
links
I've noticed
like
that.
spam.
Yeah,
It's like,
I
geez,
know.
I'm trying to refer somebody to a different channel. Um, so if I put it in a post, it I'll just put by the name. So
That's very
I'll do it
generous.
that
And if
way.
it doesn't work,
Yeah,
that's totally fine.
yeah.
But
Uh, so let's
yeah,
see. Failure is more interesting than success anyway.
it can be.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of my most memorable moments, and it was in one of those cases where the character really just didn't understand the charm spell that he cast and how it kind of would work, and they had captured this dark druid, an evil druid, neutral evil. So he was so neutral, but kind of corrupted, mentally corrupted, and thinking that, I'm still neutral, even though I'm doing all this crazy stuff. But he charmed them, and they decided to leave him in a storage closet as they continued walking around, searching the rest of the. This was B1. They were searching Quescaton, that dungeon area, and they went back to him like several hours later to pick him up, and he was gone. And I was like, what made you think he would just sit there?
He's not going to stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't just stay there. You just left him in a room and walked
He's
away.
Live there? Okay, don't go anywhere. You're in a timeout now. Yeah. No.
He wandered off, and now he's pissed at you. And for the next 65 sessions, he was your nemesis,
Sure.
that you're trying to track him down again.
Oh, yeah. I love having a nemesis for the party. I love it.
But anyway, let's
see. What my players doing are now, like what we're doing as players now, is we're introducing those elements in.
Yeah, so that's the fourth TD that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, we're not, because we're not interested. None of us, and this just, again, it might just be us in our little corner, but we're not interested in just having someone tell us a story.
Right.
Like, I'm not interested in that.
And
it's not because they're we're much more, here's the opening obstacle, and then there'll be obstacles that come up based on your decisions or lack of decision, I guess you could also say. So based on decisions or things that you did or didn't do, things will transpire. But we'll have like Phil in one of our games. Phil was he was all the time. He was a new NPC in every scene. It was just hilarious. I think he was almost trying to just push the envelope to see where it starts to break down. And so now we have to clarify this before 3D or any other type of D stamp.
Yeah, I think it
means just dimensions.
Yeah, it's dimensions. It's like a level of
It's in essence, there's three.
Presence
there's three. So it's in some ways, and it has been described by some as just the level of engagement, which isn't quite true, because I do think that there are people who can be very, very engaged in what we would call a 2D or mostly out of character game, and they're still super into it, and they're thinking about it, and they're having a great time. It's not about that. It's about how in character can you remain, and 3D just means you're in character for almost all the session, as much as you can. Call it 70 to 85% or more. And 4D is the same, with just the co-creation element added. So with some, of course, some limitations put on it.
Right.
Thanks to Phil and him bringing in, a couple dozen NPCs. And
But again, like, so getting back to, so like when you said, like when I have characters, they enter a room, I describe, the 4 or 5.
I just say what's there. Yeah, I say what's there.
You can see, hear, smell, feel, possibly taste if you want to taste anything in there.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, if the
I just don't say
character
you.
Says, the character says, well, I'm going to go to the window. All right. And
if I don't want the window to be there, it's boarded up.
Yeah, I go to the window. All right. I got rid of the going to. All right. I go to the window. All right.
I walk to the window.
I might not have put a window in there, but it makes sense that there would be one. And so there is.
Of course. How many buildings
so
have
that's
rooms with no windows, especially if it's a large room? Like so we tend to allow the definition of the world to be increased by the player's description as well as the game master's description.
That's perfect. Yes.
With always the caveat to that the game master can alter anything that's created by the player. So the player might talk about the window with the idea that he's going to flee through the window, but it might be a coated window. It's a bulletproof glass, or it has metal shutters on the outside. Sure, there's a window there, but I've altered it
Yeah.
You can say that you found, the kettle of water on the stove. That makes sense. I didn't say it was there, but sure, it's there. It may be empty. If I, it's if it's a matter of, hey, this would be, and we may roll like I
Mm.
might be quietly rolling to see whether or not it's.
Right.
So I don't want people to get the impression that, oh, well, these guys just hand wave every obstacle away by creating solutions
Yeah.
in the moment. That's not what happens. But it's yeah. So I agree with Uriah Grant
Yeah.
Edwards. If I wanted to hear someone tell me a story, I'd open up Audible. And
Yeah.
exactly that, if you want to hear a story, just listen to a nice book. I'm listening to a great book. If you like kind of the adventure noir, it's written by Larry Correia. It's called the Grim Noir
Yeah.
Chronicles, and it's this interwar period, but magic is real, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's well done. You can listen to Lord of the Rings. They've got what's Andy Serkis has narrated the Lord of the Rings books now, including The Hobbit,
Yeah.
and Andy Serkis does an amazing job. But we're not looking for that either. We don't
Yeah.
want to be told a story, and so that's
Right.
why when I give a description of that room, like you were saying, and I
Mm.
was describing, I don't say I. And this is going to sound super weird, but we don't say you, or we try to avoid the you in the description, because I don't want to fall into, and it's not that it's inherently bad, but I don't want to fall into that verbing that we talked about earlier, where
Right.
you feel this, you are I can just say the temperature is cold. I, the players can
Okay.
role play how they respond to that.
Right.
I can just say what's there without saying you see. This is what it is. And that's just it's a thing we're trying to do. We're
All right. So
we're
even for
trying
the
to be very
senses,
careful of that.
you avoid like you see.
No,
Um,
yeah,
so not even
I
you
avoid it.
enter. How do you get?
For
How do
my
you?
own self, I avoid it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you get beyond you've entered? You've entered a
So
room.
they describe entering. I don't restate it. So
All
because
right. So
I refuse to move the
okay.
character. So if for example you're playing the character, or let's say you're the game master and I'm the
Right.
player, and my character walks up to the door. I walk up to the door, I open the door and take a step inside. Okay, now I can interact with that. And there's no need for the game master to restate what my
But you've
action was.
entered, right?
Yeah.
But then you'd have to
Because
say
I
he.
yeah,
Like, how do you describe like? Oh, you could just say the room.
the room.
The room looks like.
A large room, a
Yeah.
dining room table in the
Okay.
center
All
with
right.
high back
So
chairs all
just try
around.
to avoid you.
Just
See, I
I
was
just
thinking
avoiding
like
the you.
avoiding you, like the way
Mhm.
that I think of that, like the pitfall is that you don't want the player to think that you're talking to the player
Yeah,
instead of the character too. You know
that's
what I'm
right.
saying? It's like,
I'm describing to the character, not to the
yeah,
player. And
okay.
so if I am in that moment, I am acting as the character's eyes, but
Hmm.
I'm not going to say you, because that can add that element of confusion that I'm now
Right.
speaking to the player. I'm not speaking to the player. I'm
Yeah.
speaking as the
Yeah.
character's eyes.
Yeah. That's an
I know
interesting way to
that's
put it. Yeah, you're speaking as the character's eyes. You can say
yeah.
what you want is
Like
what
so
that's.
in others instead of saying um you you taste
There are. Yes.
sweetness or something like that, I
Yeah.
would just say a sweet taste on the
Yeah.
tongue. Like
There's a sweet taste on the air. Yeah.
yeah,
You'd say
exactly.
like,
Or a foul, or like a foul smell,
yeah,
or smell of rotten meat.
yes.
And I'm not going to say you're disgusted by, or
Well,
you're
no, because that's
salted
really an
by.
emotion on them, actually.
That's
So that's even
I
more
don't enter
so.
emotions. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, like, and that was one of the things, like, when they were talking about verbing in that one video, and someone started listing, and it was like, never tell the players you see, and I was kind of disagreeing with that, because it's like those are, sight, sound,
Sure.
feel, like I said, like I actually mentioned, I was like, well, not emotional feel, but textual feel, or temperature feel or that kind of thing, you could certainly
Yep.
describe, because it's something that they would be sensing. But I do like, the fact that you're saying, like, just don't say you.
Just don't say you,
The room
because I don't
feel.
want to get into that
Yeah.
verbing thing.
Yes.
And Max has got a good. I'm glad you highlighted his comment,
Yeah.
and his next comment is good because he did have a short video just kind of going through this and the methodology that we're using. Not that we always agree 100% on everything, but I would say that in that aspect we're all pretty much aligned. Though if you watch some of our games, you'll hear us saying it because it's really hard to break that habit.
Yeah.
Would you mind highlighting the Sable Phoenix comment there, because I'd
Oh,
like to
this one
answer
down
his
here.
question.
Sure.
He's asking me to how would I describe something like, and he gives a nice environment description. The cavern behind the waterfall is chill and damp. The moisture starts to beat on your hair and dip down your face. All I would change on that, I actually would say something like that, is just that condensation covers, water drips, condensation immediately gathers on all objects. And then it's up to the player to envision that and describe it on their turn
Mm.
as the, my beard is wet, or,
Mm-hmm.
they can take that initiative, and I expect them to, and because I'm expecting them to, as much as possible, be in that character in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So your initial description is perfect. Cavern
Yeah.
behind the waterfall is chill and damp, and the air is heavy with moisture, condensation on all over. The surfaces glisten with water. That's enough, I think, for excellent player like Max or Phil to immediately start playing with that. Like,
Mm.
oh, I'm wet everywhere. I slip on the, like there's
Mm-hmm.
so, not to say that your description is bad, and you'll hear us
Yeah.
doing stuff like that,
Mhm.
but we're trying to gravitate away from that. Just give enough information so that the players can then play with it and see what their characters were doing. So yeah, we do. And Max's answer is good too, where he's talking about how um, you can you can use you as the subject. We're just trying to avoid it as the, like, so the like the subject object, like, so that
Yeah.
what the action is, but not as the pronoun that we're, the subject that we're. I don't know. It's been a long time since I took grammar. Don't ask me to.
Yeah. So Shauner makes mention in his book that we shouldn't fast travel anything.
Mhm.
And getting to that point, that was my hang up in that one game, was like I felt like we were
Oh,
teleporting everywhere.
we were, yeah, we were,
Yeah,
and
we
that
were
was my
teleporting
that we
everywhere. It
were.
was
I
like,
agree with you. Yeah, no, your perception of that is matches my own. There was a lot of, okay, you're just here now. You're just here now. You're just here
yeah, I
now.
was
Wait, wait,
like
wait,
that.
wait,
I
wait,
was
wait.
like,
Like, where?
there has to be movement in between. I was here and
Yeah,
now how
and
did
it
I get
was just,
there?
you're here, then you're here, then you're here,
Yeah.
then you're. And let's talk about this here. Uriah, it says Shauner makes mention in his book that we shouldn't fast travel anything. How would you approach that idea in regards to backtracking without retreading previously described details? I I have super high expectations for players. I expect players to remember things, make notes if they have to, and I am prepared when it comes to backtracking or going over ground again. If they get a subtle detail wrong, I'm not going to correct them. I don't do the, well, actually, and
Mm,
then afterwards, after the game is over, then we can talk about it. But I do not, Uriah, I don't do the,
mm,
actually you should have turned left, not right.
yeah.
Um,
Oh no, you can't.
player
Yeah.
Other players will do things like, through their characters, because they're all trying to stay in character. They'll say it as the role play, hey, where are you going? You turn the wrong way, like, what are you? But in terms of fast travel, the way we handle it, because we do have fast travel, uh what we'll do is we'll go in, we're always in a round robin or close to it. We're always going through an order when everyone has said that they're traveling, and then they kind of anchor their character, like, oh, I light up a pipe as we're we're walking towards the mine in the distance. That's a signal to the game master that we're not planning anything else. And so the game master then can just fast forward the travel.
Mm.
If everyone has had a chance to say what they're doing, and everyone's like, oh well, I guess we'll just walking over, and we do have kind of around the campfire type role play during the travel that can happen. But anyway,
Yeah.
so but we don't. But the main thing that the and Sean is mentioning it. He's the author, so he's probably a better one to
Mm.
ask. That we don't do we try not to re-narrate what
Right.
a player has done. I think that, regardless of the system that you're trying to role play in, if you're falling into this I'm going to say back to the player everything they've done on their turn, then you're encouraging your players in maybe indirectly, maybe directly, you're encouraging them to not take that initiative on themselves. If you're just going to say it all back to them, don't
Yeah,
say
they're not going
anything
to pay
back to
attention.
them.
They might as well be on
Yeah,
their cell phone.
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
And
they might as
everyone
well be on
and
their cell
other
phone.
players learn that they don't have to pay
Yeah.
attention, because
Yeah.
the game master is just going to they're just going to restate everything,
Yeah.
and they might gloss it up because, oh, look at my
Yeah.
vocabulary, I can make it sound cooler what your character did. No, it's up to
Yeah.
you to decide what your character did, and if you want your character to sound cool, then you better do something about it. Don't expect me to do it. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
the one that, if you want to do some cool move with your sword or sneak up or trip or push someone off a cliff, don't
Mm.
rely on me. You can interpret the
Yeah.
dice that way. If it's a good system where the dice is not difficult to interpret the result,
Mm.
then we decide at the beginning of the game, do you describe your successes, or do I describe your
Mm.
successes? Do you describe your failures, or do I describe your failures? And then that's how we do it. But
Yeah.
anyhow, I feel like
Well,
I've gone on
you
too many
front load
tangents
that,
here.
right?
I'm sorry about that.
Well, no, I want to get back on that. So I would see that like players should describe their successes, and the game master should describe their failures.
We've done both in my
Yeah.
in-person group. They always choose that they want to describe their failures, which I
Really?
I was
So
frankly surprised, because I thought, well, if they describe their failures, it's always going to be like, oh, he just nicked me. Like it was, I'm like, I failed, but nothing.
yeah.
But that's not what
Well, no, they,
happens. Like
they
I've had
can't get
people
away from the
describe,
number. You know what I'm
oh,
saying? They can't get
yeah,
away from the number. Like they're
they can't get
fumbling.
away from the number, but
Fumble.
but
Right.
they can make it, like, through their descriptions. I've had people do some amazing descriptions that
Yeah.
just, when it comes to their failures. But we've done both. We've done it
Yeah.
where, the I don't. That's fine. It's just
All
something
right.
you decide what works for your group.
All right. So let's see.
It's not a storytelling game, Sable, in the fact that we're still relying on the dice mechanic. It's the dice mechanic that matters.
Yeah.
So it's the mechanic that, okay, what are they doing? What are they attempting? Is there a skill? Do they have some attribute? Do they have something in their character sheet that gives them a benefit or a malice, as Max would call it, a penalty?
Yeah.
And then it's still resolved that way. Same for damage or
Yeah.
any kind of skill check or
The
tests.
problem with the problem with the what do you want to do? It's
I
not,
don't do that.
that's not the problem of the game master. That's the problem that too many players will just sit there
You'll
and
just
not
sit there.
act in time, right? They'll just say, it's like they need an extra prompt sometimes. It's like, it's just a prodding. It's prodding them to move forward. I don't know why players wait to hear that, and maybe
They're waiting for options. They're afraid of losing. They don't want to lose.
So it's like, but it's ultimately it's a
Give
game.
me some.
It's
well,
like,
what
you're
do you
not
do?
losing
What do you
anything
do?
significant.
I think that the impetus behind the "what do you do" question is maybe, well, I want to see some movement. I want to see some action. I want to see, like, let's get going. Let's do something. So like that's
they literally
it's
will
like
sit there
begging
sometimes.
players, please do something. I think that you can set the expectation and have players be on the initiative to do things. So yeah, you're on the initiative already.
Determining who decides success or failure seems very much like, no, you're not determining success or failure. You're
Well,
determining who
it's
describes it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so
it's a determination of who describes success or
yeah,
failure. Well, not
it's not
really. I
modifying the game
disagree
mechanic.
with your characterization there. I don't think that's the key mechanic. I think Max's comment is, it's storytelling game. You already have, you're doing things in a storytelling game to tell a better story.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to tell a better story. That's a great way to ruin a game,
Yeah,
is to try to tell a better story. Because if you're just trying to tell a better story, well then you're going to have issues with plot armor, and you're going to have, oh well, we better not have dice, because then that might ruin the dramatic tension of this story that we're building. We're not trying to build a story. What we're trying to do is we're trying to embody the characters in the moment with the greatest fidelity and integrity as we can. So integrity to the character, not to what the player wants or what might be cool in the story. Here's a spoiler alert: most of my characters that I role play die. Is that good in the story? Well, not really, because they don't accomplish their goals. They usually fail, and yet I still feel like it was a success, because
right.
I still was able to embody that character as best I could as a role player for whatever many hours. The story isn't the focus. The
Right.
focus is on the role play of the character
Mm-hmm.
to the highest fidelity that we can.
Right. I'll wait to see if Shauna answers this question. Inner thoughts.
Yeah.
What's your thought on like character? I mean,
Inner
unless,
thoughts? Yeah.
unless the
Yeah.
character is voicing them out loud,
Mm-hmm.
then
You have to decide that in advance. Now,
themselves,
in
yeah.
online games, it's hard to do that and not have it become confusing. In in-person games, it's a little easier, but it's something you have to decide in advance if you're going to do that. We've played it where it's okay to give inner thoughts, like a character you can do that. I've sometimes will do that. The problem is that we're trying to be in character role players the whole time, which means that we don't have that pause the world. You know what pausing
Mhm.
the world
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like,
yeah,
where the party wants to get together in the middle of the dungeon and
yeah,
have a big tactical discussion about this,
yeah,
and the bad guys are just down the hallway,
yeah.
but we haven't rolled initiative yet, and you're still having this, and so there's this a totally out of character
Right.
discussion
No.
over the plans that are going to have. But you can't pause the world. So the issue with inner commentary or inner thoughts of the character, it's great. It's great that you're having those as the player. Just got to be careful that, like I would say, my preference would be that the player would say things like, "I think to myself," which is cue that I'm not saying this out loud.
Right.
I wonder to myself.
Mhm.
That's all good.
Yeah. You know what? You know what
That's all
game
good.
system that's actually built into is
Mhm.
Blade Runner.
Oh, really? I
Blade
haven't
Runner.
played
There's
Blade Runner.
times when the Blade Runner. There's times when the player is going to describe how their character is interpreting
Good.
the evidence that they're looking at. All right, to
Mhm.
drive the next step, and that's how you reveal. But they're
Yeah.
actually expressing what they're thinking, you
What they're
know,
thinking. Yeah.
and then that gives a different, now they're going to get evidence piece B instead of A or whatever. So, but yeah, that's more of a more intellectual investigation style of game that's designed for that. So that's where I
Yes, it's
could
true.
see definitely getting
Yeah.
into them expressing their thoughts when it's something
Sure.
along those lines. It's actually
Sure.
cooked in the books.
Yeah.
But
So there's
otherwise,
yeah.
keep it to
Yeah.
yourself
I
unless
have
you're
to
going
get
to
it. I have to get
verbally.
that game. I don't have that game yet. I absolutely have to get that
Yeah.
game. My channel name is Table Runner, for crying out
I
loud.
would I would
Why do
definitely
I
get
not have that?
definitely get the definitely get the box set, the starter box.
Yeah, say, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's the way to
that
go.
one is the adventure in that one is phenomenal,
Yeah.
and it's also the only one that gives you pre-gen characters, because none of their other additional
Mhm.
case files give you character pre-gen characters for them. Not even new ones for the new character classes, which is why I didn't back their last one, because I was like, that's bullshit. It's like it should give you, if you have a new class, give me a new freaking, won't cost you that much to do one freaking sheet. It's like
Come on, guys.
um so let's see.
Yeah, it looks great. OSR Knight asks a question I'd like to address, and then I
Let's
should
see, where is
yield
it?
the floor to someone else. It says,
Uh,
"Then why do some people argue?" And this is right underneath Shauner's comment back to Uriah. Then
okay.
why do some people argue that if a player hasn't reached a certain level in a certain amount of time, then there's something wrong? I
Am I that far
I
back? Whose thing is it? Oh, there it is.
Oh,
There
it's
it is.
it's way
Sorry.
down there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a very interesting question because I think it speaks to the different mentalities of these games. There are some games where it appears to me that the goal of the game isn't role play. The goal of the game is to accumulate class abilities through leveling up,
Hmm.
and that's the goal. The goal isn't how well I can embody, because this will come up a lot, where if a character has goals, as they should, and motivations, because why else would they be risking life and limb in a dangerous
Right.
world? They have to have some reason to do that.
Hmm.
But if the only why wouldn't they, once they've satisfied their goals, those motivations, why wouldn't they retire? Why is it that retirement has to be level 20 or level 10 or level, like, why? What is this concept of leveling? And what we've tended to do is our play, like, we're not as leveling up is fun and all, but it's not the goal of our play. Our
Right.
goal of the play is embodying the character. So role play is the goal, not leveling up. So
Right.
what we've done is we would decide in a session 0 or something, we just say, what kind of game are we looking for? What level corresponds with that game? Oh, we're going to start with level 5, or we're going to start with level 10, or whatever it is. Or we'll start level 1. Most of the time it's level 1.
Right.
And we'll just set that, because the goal for us isn't, I want to get the new class abilities in that unlock only at certain levels, or I just want to get my +1 on to hit at level 2, or I just want to get my extra attack at level 5, or I just want to, like, why? That to me is a player goal. It's not a believable
Right.
character goal, unless your character, I suppose, is like, no, I want to be the best swordsman in the world so that I can defeat the evil Black Knight or whatever. Like,
Right.
okay, sure, then that could make sense. But I'm we're not we're ourselves personally, we're not playing just to see, well, how cool is it to level up? Like, we're not really of
Right.
that mindset. So that's, some people do argue that hey, if
Yeah.
you're not leveling up at a certain rate, then you're doing it wrong.
Well,
Maybe it's possible.
some game systems aren't built for that. Like Call of Cthulhu, you could argue, you know, it's unheard of for investigators to do more than 3 investigations.
Yes.
You usually don't
Yeah.
survive one,
No, it's a
but
it's a
it's
it's a role playing the insanity, like the
yeah,
fall into insanity. That's what you're role playing. You should be
yeah,
starting off with that. It's not,
yeah.
I'm
So
going to
it's
defeat a great old one.
So do
No.
you find that by doing that though, you have shorter campaigns, like because
The
they're
campaigns
more
can go any duration. It's the characters that'll change out. So, like, the
right?
world can continue, as I'm sure
Okay, yeah,
yours have, right?
yeah,
Especially because you play a lot of OSR games, and OSR typically are deadlier systems. So you'll have characters die more often,
right,
generally speaking, but the campaign can keep going. It's just that
yeah. Well,
there'll
yeah,
be
I
new
separate like
characters.
yeah, I'm separating campaign from campaign world,
Sure.
where multiple different characters can live within the same world, and that timeline is
Yep.
consistent and continues running.
Yep.
And a campaign like a group of characters or even a single character, that, single player, I tend to like to have, when I do my other systems other than Castles and Crusades, 3 to 4 players at the most,
Yeah, me
and
too.
so smaller
Yeah.
groups, and I'm
Smaller groups.
getting the sense that you like that better too. All right.
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I do. I
because
prefer it.
once you have like 8, a
Mhm.
lot of these things start falling apart. Once you have
Yeah.
8 or 10, 10 players at the table, then it's
Yes.
much harder to rein that in and,
That's
get
true.
everybody on the
That's
same
true.
page and all that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's
yeah,
true.
but
That's true.
I have been
But I like
needing
we'll
to work
have
small groups.
Oh, absolutely. I have had many players decide that their character has reached the goals that the character
Mhm.
had for it, and then they choose to retire the character, and they're excited to make a new one.
Yeah,
And that I think is fantastic. It shouldn't
yeah,
always be you will adventure till you die.
hmm
No, you got a big win. You've got
hmm
enough gold now that you'll never have to work another day in your life, or you'll lift yourself from peasant class to merchant class, or maybe buy into the nobility. Okay, you're done. You're not going to risk your life in another dungeon. Like you're done. That's fine. And play. That's up to the players to decide. So it's not just when they're in the pine box in the ground that the characters are retired. I let players retire their characters when they see when it makes sense for the character to be retired in their view, and then still be in the campaign. I don't give them the boot. Well, DM
Which
Bloodward,
one's the?
I
Oh,
really appreciate you having me on. I do have
oh,
to run.
okay.
It was a pleasure to have this conversation. I hope that it's been of some worth to someone out
Oh
there
no,
looking
you
at game
definitely opened
systems.
my eyes on a few things and cleared up a few things as well. And you know, um, I'm sure that everyone else. I mean, a lot of engagement here, a lot of people watching.
Yeah, lots of good
Um,
comments.
so and really important. So what I'm going to do is again, when we shut this down, once it goes live, kind of, I'll actually be able to reconfigure the way it goes on there, so that if you want to, you can take this whole thing and embed it on your own.
Oh yeah,
And
perfect.
Shauna, you're
Totally
welcome to
good.
take it and pick it apart and do whatever you
That would
want
be an
there.
honor. Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, no, I really appreciate it because
Well, and we want to
like I
get you in
said,
the game. We want to
yeah,
get you gaming
but yeah,
again. You need to be in more
yes,
games.
I will give it a shot again, and I will try to get the verbiage, the
Oh.
movement verbs out of my head. And,
Well, we're
you know,
we're we're not quite as dogmatic as
yeah,
that particular game master, but at the same token, I think it's practice makes perfect, and it's a lot of
yeah,
fun. It's just
yeah,
it's incredibly
yeah,
rewarding. It's difficult,
mm,
but as most things are that are difficult, there's a big reward at the end too. So
yeah.
thank you very much for having
Yeah.
me. It's been a pleasure,
No, it's
and
great having you on, and thank you everyone for participating as well. And like I said, I'll do all of those things after it goes. I don't even know what you call that. Like once it uploads, I mean, it's certainly live
yeah,
streaming. It's already there, but I think it takes a few moments before you can
switch
actually
over.
put
Yeah,
new comments in there and whatnot.
sure.
So anyway, so thanks a lot, and I will definitely be looking into your channel to see when there's an opportunity to play. When do you guys usually run your games?
There's different times, but we have a group that meets on Mondays, most Mondays. But that
Okay,
said, there we've had games at different time slots.
yeah.
Um, our little Discord is more about just setting up opportunities for people to get together and play. Is
And am I on your
what we
Discord?
do.
Um,
I think you were invited at least at one time, but we can certainly get you another
yeah,
invite if
I'll
you need.
double check and make sure that I'm there. I probably am, but who knows?
Sure.
At one point, I had like about 50 discords, and I'm, I
Yeah,
think
I
I
went
am
through and
there.
cleaned up.
Um,
Yeah,
it
I
wasn't
think
the other
so. But
Discord because I know when I got dropped off the other game, I came
oh
out of that
yeah, yeah,
Discord,
yeah.
obviously.
I'm not on
Uh,
there either. So
but yeah,
yeah.
I'll double check and see. All
Good.
right,
Sounds great.
thanks
Well,
a
thank you
lot.
so much.
Yep,
Yeah.
and thank everyone for participating again. And you all have a great, what's today? Thursday. You have a great week. When you're sick, you forget days too. So it's like you have a
Get
great
well
upcoming
soon.
weekend.
Yeah,
All right, take care.
absolutely. Thank you.